Yeah, I used to own a Chiefs shirt like when I was a teenager because like this is back when I was still living in Utah. But like I even back then, I don't know, maybe it was like a foreshadowing that I was going to be moving here, but I was definitely rooting for him. That was quite the game. I don't know if like
Any Super Bowl that goes into overtime is definitely quite the game.
yeah, like did you have a chance? Did you watch it or did you have a chance to see
Sure.
it?
But I watched it. See, what I do is I record it because it's at 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning, so I'm not about to get up and do that.
Yeah,
And then I do a complete news blackout. I don't look at the newspaper. I don't even check WhatsApps, nothing. And then I just manage to get to the computer and watch it, as if it's live. Plus, I
yeah.
can skip the advertisements, and I'm certainly not interested in the halftime show.
Oh, yeah. No, me neither. And the commercials are just like so like I every single Super Bowl I feel like it just like comes through. They're just like trying so hard, like too hard to be funny, and it's all very slapsticky and I don't know,
Right.
it's kind of silly.
Out cool the cool.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a very exciting game to watch.
Mm, it was a great game. Somebody asked me which team I was rooting for, so I just said, uh, gosh, I forgot her name now. Taylor Swift.
Yeah, Taylor Swift. Yeah. So I meant to ask you this last time. How are
Last time
your
was like 5 years ago.
yeah, it was a long time ago. How are your grandsons doing? Because I know that at least at one point they were deployed to the war. Are they still there?
Yeah, no, well, actually, they've been back and now they're back again. But I think they're back only for another week. One of them is actually in as a soldier. The other one was down there as a medic and an ambulance driver. And he became kind of a national celebrity here because he saved 10 people's lives and a
Oh,
military dog on the same day.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so now he found the little puppy in one of the cities in Israel that was massacred on October 7th. And that little puppy has now been named after the name of that village, which is Iberia, and now is living with him here in Jerusalem. And it's a white Labrador, and it's being used as part of a new PTSD program using dogs to help people with, trauma incidents from the war.
Yeah. Well, I have to look that up. So like there's been like some articles written about him or
Oh yeah, I can send you. I even have some stuff in English. I can send it to you.
yeah. Yeah, if you don't mind, and then I'll share it with the
I don't
channel.
know.
That's really neat. I'm glad that they're both okay.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. So, well, this time I have like some of my own questions that I want to ask, but I better ask some of these other questions from some of my viewers. So here, I should have,
How would I know the difference, by the way?
huh?
How would I know the difference
Of what?
if it's yours or from someone else?
I'll let you know.
Oh,
So,
okay, good. I'll rate them now. I have little like cards here, 1 to 10 on each one.
okay, so guess who asked this question? Me or a viewer? Just kidding.
But yeah, that's good.
Okay, I don't know what this person is referring to. This is from Sarah Benz. Ask him about the Jewish idea slash phrase about next year in the New Jerusalem. Does that, do you know what that is?
Sure. I just didn't never saw that part though.
I've never heard of that before.
I don't know if they have rabbit ears in the Bible, but okay. It actually, it's not, I mean, I don't want, God forbid, whatever, but I mean, the expression is not exactly as stated. It's not New Jerusalem, it's rebuilt Jerusalem.
Rebuilt.
Yerushalayim Habuniyah doesn't mean new. That would be Yerushalayim Chadash. Yerushalayim Buniyah means rebuilt. It's the same Jerusalem as it's always been. By the way, just a side point, did you ever notice in English the word Jerusalem has in the middle of the letters USA?
Yeah, I actually saw like a meme or something like that had that. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, in the biblical, in Yerushalayim, it doesn't, but at least in the English, it does, which is sort of fun. So, yeah, the term is Hashana Haba b'Yerushalayim HaBiriyah. Hashana, the year, Haba, to come, meaning next year,
Mhm.
should be, I'm interjecting, in Yerushalayim, in the Jerusalem, which has been rebuilt. Because from the time that the second temple was destroyed, the prophets referred to Jerusalem as the fallen sukkah of King David. And so therefore, one of the expressions is Yakim Lano et Sukkot HaDavid HaNefelet, which means that we pray to God that God should rise back up the fallen sukkah, tabernacle of David.
So it's kind of like this phrase is like, is it like a prayer, or is it just kind of like a saying, like a saying of like, I hope like um the temple will be with us next year. May it be soon. Is it something like that?
Yeah, but isn't that also a prayer? I mean, it's kind of a morph, right?
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
nobody knows what happens to him 10 seconds from now. So,
Okay. Let's move on to the next one. This is
wait, was I
from,
supposed to explain something about that more, or did we cover it okay? I don't want to leave her
oh, I don't know.
hanging.
What was there? Is there more to say about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we could take a few days on it.
Oh, okay. Well, how about just a few more minutes, like 5 minutes? Like,
Oh, we don't need that much.
what
You
are the
you
most important things about it?
you count the Mississippi's in the background. I would say that really, here's the key. I mean, she's brought up something very deep, so it's good question deserves it and a good answer. Let's
Okay.
look at Jerusalem in high speed. So the place of Jerusalem, according to our tradition at least, is the place where the soil was taken from where Adam was made. So the creation of mankind or humankind or whatever you have, I don't know how you Americans say these things anymore. I always feel I'm stepping in mud. But in mankind, when I was a kid in America 50 years ago, we said mankind, nobody got upset about it. So Jerusalem is the place where God creates human, and human has been created in order to be a partner with God. That's the first major element. The second major element is it's the place where Noah shoved off the ark. I mean, the ark landed or ended in Armenia, Turkey, in Mount Ararat, but its point of departure was from what we call Jerusalem. Then the next classic moment when the name Jerusalem appears with a name is after Abraham fights the war of the four against the five kings. And now he returns and he is greeted by Noah's son Shem, which is, I think, called Tzedek Melech. And maybe I don't know how to say it in
Yeah,
English.
in English we call it Melchizedek.
A Melchizedek, right? Melchizedek. Melchizedek means Melch is king. Tzedek means righteous, the righteous king. So this was Shem. This was Noah's spiritual son. Noah had three sons, one of which was very spiritual, and that became known as the righteous king. And he was the priest of Jerusalem. And that encounter of Abraham with him is in Jerusalem. Now, at that point in time, Jerusalem only had half of its name, which was in Hebrew we call Shalom. But I think in English, what unfortunately I get these like witches being burnt in Massachusetts images, Salem.
Mhm.
That's where the word Salem comes from, which is a little bit more like the Arabic than the Hebrew. But anyhow, so because Arabic say Salum Aleichem, we say Shalom Aleichem. But the word Shalom, as you know, means peace and it means whole, Whole. So therefore, he was the king of peace and whole. Now, why is peace and whole the same word? Because you don't really have peace unless the whole world is living in peace. Otherwise, it's Piece. So that was the next place. But then the next place after that becomes the altar of Abraham offering Isaac, same spot. And that then Abraham renames Jerusalem to its new component, which is Iru Shalem. So Shalem was already there, but Abraham said you cannot have peace in the world without awareness of God. Won't happen. Man without God will always feel that he can cut deals behind the people's backs and behind doors and say one thing publicly and do a whole nother monster, horrible thing privately. So when a person realizes that there's God, then the world turns into doll houses with no roofs and God sees everything. Can't find a place to sin if you really believe in God. So therefore, that's what Abraham, and he introduced Iru, which means the awareness, also means the awesomeness, and also means the fear of God. It's nice to love God, but that's fine. But when things get tough, the fear of God is what's going to carry you through. So that's where the name ultimately Yerushalayim or Yerushalayim, which then goes through several languages until you get to Jerusalem. And then after that, it became the time when King David, with the prophet Samuel, then determined, because God kind of did it as a riddle, where Jerusalem actually is and where the temple should be built, which was then consummated by his son, King Solomon. And it existed there 400 plus years until the Babylonians came along and destroyed it. The Jews were exiled for 70 years. They returned with Ezra after the famous Purim story, which is coming up. And then they rebuilt the temple for another 400 plus years until the Romans came along. And that's kind of where we've been at now. So therefore, this idea of Jerusalem really represents A, God's home, first and second temple, and soon the third temple, God willing. And it also, as God's home, represents a place where all mankind can come together. Isaiah, see if I can do it like you guys, chapter 56, verse 7, where you will clearly see that the third temple is not a Jewish temple. It's a temple of all the nations, or I take that back. All the righteous nations that stayed with Israel through the war will be allowed there. The rest won't even be alive, so that won't make a difference. So therefore, ultimately, that third temple will be the time of messianic time, resurrection of the dead. It'll all hover on Jerusalem. So that's our prayer, that that Jerusalem, which is for all mankind, should be rebuilt speedily in our days. I think that was a better answer.
Very good. I like that. That's really
5 minutes and 10 seconds. Sorry.
So one thing you said that, because I think we talked about this before. They've been doing a archaeological dig in the city of David, and they believe that they found Melchizedek's temple. They call it the Matseva temple. It has like an altar. It also has like I guess the reason why it's called Matseva temple is because of the like another altar that you kind of like kneel at with like an upright stone and stuff. Um, you said something to the effect that, from Melchizedek to Abraham, like Abraham came to the same spot, of Melchizedek. But is it up on the Temple Mount where there's that foundation stone? Like that's where he would have done it,
Yes.
or
The Evan Shasia. It's called the Evan. Evan means stone. It means that's interesting. It means the drinking stone.
why is it called that?
That's an interesting question because don't forget, really, how could there be anything which is completely physical in the face of God, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, even the ultimate physical, a hard rock, is also spiritual. In fact, in deep mystical literature, people can even come back reincarnated as stones. Reincarnation isn't just limited from human to human. So therefore, this particular stone, according to the Kabbalah, was like the first thing created even before there was a planet, maybe like a kind of a cosmic godly meteorite of some sort, which was the emanation of light, and then it emanated the 10 sphirot, and the part like leftover kind of coagulated, and then that became the core at the what ultimately became the place where the altar was in the temple. It's
Uh,
also the place, as you know, because you guys know this much better than me, where in the end of days, which I actually spell it as Daze, in the end of us all being dizzy, and then the real days of God begin. Well, it's not like the end of the days and Porky Pig pops out and says, "That's all, folks." It's just the opposite. It's the beginning of real life. Right now, we're in the make believe land, but in the future, out of that very rock will begin a new river, and that little river will then spread to the whole world, and so on and so on. It's all there in the book of Yecheskel. I think it's also in Yeshayahu.
yeah. So referring to his vision where the river came out, healed the Dead Sea.
That's right, and that
And
river begins in that from inside that stone.
I was watching the last video. I was like just kind of like reviewing it before we started talking here, and we were talking at one point. You were talking about the Garden of Eden and the four rivers, the one that split into four. Um, is the Garden of Eden? Is it in Jerusalem or
No,
is it close to there?
I don't think so. I think it's much more in what would be known as Mesopotamia.
Okay. Excuse me.
Bless you.
And you were talking about the fact that like the four rivers correspond to the four letters of God's name.
And the
And
four elements and the four directions and the four exiles.
why does it talk about like it talks about the different lands that it goes to, and I think the first river that's described, it goes to a land where there's like the Ankh stone and battalion. What is that all about?
Well, that's that. We're not going to be able to do that in tonight's. We can do like a kind of running class until we're like both in our 90s. But the bottom line is that the each one of those rivers runs into another one of the diasporas, if you will. So therefore, the fourth river is the Roman River, if you want. And if you notice that of one of those rivers, it's called is Euphrates, which is the Iranian Persian River, relating to the whole story of Babylon and um, Iran. Gotta say Persia in English, right? So these, therefore, all of the symbols that are mentioned in context of each one of these rivers are kind of like, when you play a video game, you have to pick up little clues or little weapons as you go along. Those are what they are. They will help you if you then know how to crack the code of what they symbolize to understand what was really going on at the depth of these diasporas. Now, the four diasporas, of course, represent the four sides, for north, east, west, and south, or the four sides of God's throne. So therefore, this is all a process that's happening because God specifically created an imperfect world that would perfect itself over time, right? Even time is a creation. By God, there's no time. So God created something which would roll out and then would be followed by that which will rectify the destruction that the rollout does until it blends into harmony. That's the messianic period, if you will. But that window of opportunity in which there's now this thing called motion, because how can there be motion in front of God? And this thing which is called time, these two new elements create the playing field which enable man to have free will and to choose between good and bad, and not as a robot. Because if God all of a sudden reveals himself, it's game over. Ooh, no big deal now. But when the skies are completely blackened with the puke of the TikToks and the rest of the vomit that's coming through social media, so it's hard to believe that anybody would be on anything but the side of evil. It's kind of like, if you're half in it. I have a new expression, by the way. The term two wrongs don't make a right?
Hmm.
I've come up with two rights don't make a wrong. I'm sorry, two rights make a wrong. In other words, when two people are 100% convinced they're right, that's wrong. So,
I was scratching my head for a second there. So the four rivers correspond to the four diasporas. Is that, in other words, would that be kind of like King Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's vision of the
oh, very much
four
so. Yeah,
beasts?
sure. The four beasts, of course.
Okay. And I think this is kind of like a universal interpretation. The first one is the Babylonians, the second the Persian Medians, the third the Greeks or the Macedonian Empire, and then after that the Romans, and then the nations that came out of the Roman Empire essentially.
Right. And then the one that pops out of the head.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this movie. It was quite a long time ago. It was called Alien.
I don't think I've watched, well, I've watched part of it, I think, on
The
cable.
only scene that was dramatic was all of a sudden she's infected and the little thing pops out of her chest and like runs away. Like, so
What is the interpretation of that? Because there were like, out of that last beast, it wasn't compared to a specific animal. It was like described. Its like attributes were described, and then it talks about 10 horns, and then an 11th horn comes up. What's the interpretation of that?
Ishmael, the final exile is Ishmael. And it's based on a marriage between Rome and Islam, like the
Okay,
famous photo of Hitler meeting the Mufti during World War II.
so that's like the great last one. It's speaking like blasphemies, things against God, against the Jews, and persecuting the Jews essentially. So that would be that 11th horn.
Yeah, it's the last gasp.
Okay. Um,
By the way, you want to hear something a little creepy?
okay, sure.
Okay. And I have to tell you, well, I have a lot of problems with the American administration. I don't have any problems with the American people, or at least for the most part. My heart and soul salutes them. So what I'm about to tell you is not about the American people.
Right.
However, you might find this kind of, well, whatever. So in the Bible, there's a story which I know you know, and it's the story of Jacob wrestling with an angel.
Hmm.
And the tradition has it that that angel was the guardian angel of Esau, who is his other name was Edom, which means red, because he was the father of the Roman Empire. And so that's why if you look in the Bible, the struggle between Jacob and whoever this person was at the river Babuk there was the next thing. Jacob is now encountering his brother. And even though his brother came with 400 armed to the teeth, soldiers, and Jacob had prepared for war and all the rest of it, it didn't happen. They hug and they kiss like real true brothers. They really found their love for each other, an amazing event. And part of that is because since all of us have angelic energy, let's say, so since Esau was subjugated to being at peace with Jacob by that angel, it manifests in the next day in their relationship with each other. Now, when the angel goes to leave, Jacob says, "What's your name?" And the angel says back, "What do you need to know my name for?" Right? That's sort of strange because we know that angels are not Jerry Seinfeld sarcastic stand-up comedians. And we know that angels are supposed to have to tell the truth. So if somebody asks you what your name is, especially when you're in the army, let alone God's army, imagine your officer came over and said, "What's your name there, boy?" And you would say to him, "What's it to you?" Right? Where do you think you would be in 5 minutes after that?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to find out.
No, you would. Exactly. That's
It'd
only on
probably
Earth.
involve a broom and a mop.
Oh, that's if you're lucky,
Yeah.
right? But that's an earthly army. What about a godly army, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of the angel not giving his name is really he was actually telling him, "What is my name?" It means that my name really doesn't have substance. My name will always be depending on your relationship with the person I rule over. Now, we know that name though. We know that name, all the godly names, like think about it for a minute. Gabriel, Raphael, making the specific emphasis, Uriel. This L at the end is God's name. It's like a little battery pack. And the first part of the name is like the definition. So here's what it is. And God puts the little godly battery pack. And now you have this operating, ever ready angel.
Hmm.
Okay. So it kind of probably where the Jewish writers of Superman got all of these like Noel, all the names that they use on Krypton, where Superman came from. But that's another thing. So now, if you look at this, the angel of Esau is called Sam, and then with the name Kel, God's name. That's the name. That's
Samuel.
yes, that's the name of the angel of Esau. Now the name is Sam, really, because the other part is just as I told. So they all have that. That's just God's plug-in.
Hmm.
Now, what is Esau? What is Esau's relationship to Jacob? He was his.
Twin and older brother.
That's correct. That's right. They were twins, and therefore, to the Jewish people who then came from Jacob, Esau is our.
Twin.
No, what twin? He's twin of Jacob. He's our uncle.
Oh, that's right. I'm thinking Isaac and okay, sorry. I
That's
got
all
it
right. Isaac was
confused
their father,
for a second. Okay, yeah.
right? Isaac was their father. He had both these children. And then Esau, being Jacob's brother, means that Jacob's children, i.e., the children of Israel, he is their uncle.
Right.
That makes him Uncle Sam.
That is interesting. That
And
is
very
fun.
interesting. I'll leave it at that.
I like that. Um, really quick, I wanted to ask this about Kabbalah, and I'm gonna try and explain it for the audience, and then you can correct anything that I get wrong. So I was learning a little bit about it. There's like another YouTube channel I watch occasionally, and he was talking about the idea of klipot, like how in Judaism, when God created this world, everything is God. And so, there's not like a space where there isn't God. And so, in order for God to make this world, he created a type of void, or like a space within himself. And in doing so, there were like leftover um, aspects of God called klipot, which are essentially different things, like say like you take love for example, but it's like extreme love, or like you take something like that. It's like that to the nth degree, because it's a leftover piece of God. Is that what klipot is? And can you like explain that better?
Uh, well, how about if I modify it?
Yeah.
You know, do you know what the word itself means?
No.
It means shell. Modern day
Is it
Hebrew.
plural? Is it like shells?
Well, that would be klipot.
Yeah.
Klipa is a single shell.
Okay.
So when you eat a walnut, the shell is a klipa, and the nut is the perot, the fruit inside the nut, inside the shell, excuse me. So that's all it means. Like literally, that's what the word means, is a shell. Now, the shell really is a very interesting thing. The shell, you can't have food without shells, right? Imagine trying to, buy bananas without skins, or
Yeah.
apples without skins, or I mean everything. It's right. All these foods, fruits, vegetables, they all have a skin. Some of them are edible, of course, and some of them not. But the point is that the shell, nobody goes and plants shells to grow shells. The shell is an auxiliary that has a finite function in order to protect and enable the fruit to reach its stage of being ripe. So therefore, there's nothing evil about a shell or the klipot. And like everything, it's godly, of course. And like everything which is godly, it has purpose and function. The problem is that when we come into this world of void, as you called it, I always like to say, like, void were prohibited by God's law, but you have that void then means that we have free will. So therefore, somebody who is eating a shell, you would think is a jerk, when instead they should be eating the fruit which the shell delivered. So therefore, the shell is treated improperly and misused. That makes the experience bad, but not the shell. Shell is never bad. Nothing God makes is bad. Only thing that makes something bad is when we make it sad because we didn't use it correctly. So now I'll take your analogy, love. There is no such thing as life in this planet without love. This is why love, I know this is not a big favorite number in America, but number of love is in numerical value is 13. And love is 13 because really unity is 12, 12 months of the year, the 12 tribes, et cetera, et cetera. And therefore, the 13th number is all of them as one, holding from the expression that the total is greater, the sum total of is greater than the, how does the expression go in English? The total is greater than the sum, the whole is greater than the sum total of the parts. So therefore, the whole is 13. In other words, in Jewish math, 1 plus 1 does not equal 2. 1 plus 1 is less than 2. In pure math, 1 plus 1 equals 1 plus 1, because that's what it is. 1 plus 1 equals 1 plus 1. But for it to morph into a new entity called 2, 2 is more than merely 1 plus 1. Because something now, when it becomes whole, is greater than when it's just parts. So that's the same idea. 13 is now there's become whole, then there's that all-inclusive, which is why the numerical value of 13 is also echad, which means one, oneness. So oneness and love are 26, which is the name of God, Yud Ke Vav Ke. So therefore, love is what drives everything, and it's in the Bible. You shall love your God, you shall love your neighbor, you shall love the convert, you shall love the land of God, and so on and so on. But like you said, if you take that love and then you hit it up with steroids, so we call that, like, let's call it immoral or improper use, right? Like, for example, I'm imagining that your audience is always over the age of 18.
I
So,
think so, mostly, yeah.
well, if not, I think I have some of my years, and this certainly will be. I got a lot extra over 18 to pass out. But the male limb, if I could just say that in the most modest way, is a tool. It's a tool. So you go into your tool shed and you take out a screwdriver to use as a hammer. There's nothing wrong with a screwdriver. There's nothing wrong with a hammer. What's wrong was the guy who thought he could use it as a screwdriver instead of a hammer, or vice versa. So this tool is an extremely holy and powerful tool, right? We see that Abraham made Eliezer take hold of that tool in order to vow that he would not bring back an improper wife for his son, and so on. There are many such examples. And this is where the Holy Covenant is placed, the circumcision, and so on. So this is a tool given to us by God that we can partner with him and allow through our bodies and of our wife and husband in holy matrimony to create children. That's what God does. God creates people. We can create people. Phenomenal. But if we don't use that tool in that manner, so then what happens is it's an abuse of it. It's not that the tool is ever bad, God forbid. And it's not that the love is ever bad, God forbid, but it got misused, or the love can become misused. I don't know about in America, but I see people in Europe, I see people who love their pets and are nicer to their pets than their wife and their kids.
Oh yeah.
I mean, where, how, what? I mean, I love pets, but not more than my wife and my children. Are you kidding? My gifts from God.
Yeah.
So that I think is what it means. Is that everything God made is good, and when it becomes misused, it's sort of like focusing on the shell rather than on the fruit.
So it's not any sort of like physical or metaphysical like object per se. It's the misusing of tools, misusing of the
Well, it could
gifts, the
be
tools that
both.
God gave to us.
Do you ever do? I forgot what it's called in English, but you know, if you do a thing with two people, oh, I know what it is. You ever go to like the barber shop, and sometimes they have mirrors on two sides, and if you stand in the middle, it creates the infinity effect.
Hmm.
Well, God's infinite, right? So even though he locks down certain amount of, like, he blocks, you can only see this far, you can only hear to this pitch. And all, it's not that it's not infinite. It's just that he made us to live in here. Otherwise, we couldn't do what we need to do. But these are make believe parameters, or God made parameters, not real parameters. So therefore, in the most physical sense, you can have a very physical shell. But if you could put on like metaphysics glasses, maybe quantum physics glasses, and you could look at this, you would then see this like shell reverberating infinity until it becomes all the way, if you will, attached to the throne of God of pure holiness. There's nothing which is standalone. I mean, just think about the nature of the world itself. There is no space that doesn't have something. It's all filled. Everything is filled, and it's all infinite.
Okay. Now, what are in Judaism? What are demons? Are those are
I
those
was just
like
talking
what?
about that this morning. That's why I'm laughing.
Oh, okay, perfect. Well,
In
so
fact,
what
I
are
even
they
have one
exactly?
here if you
Because
like that. Oh, sorry.
because I know, we have angels. You've described angels. There's angels that have different purposes, different sizes, different lifespans, different things. You have the angels that surround the throne of God that we were just talking about a little bit earlier. Um, and then you have this idea of, klipot, which are not, my understanding, beings. They're like you said, leftover shells, these different things that you can misuse. You're supposed to focus on the fruit, not the shell. What are demons? Where do they come from, or what are they?
Right. So, if you don't mind, I'm gonna tell you a story about demons, just because it came up and it blew. We got an awfully big hat to blow off that head, but it's a great story.
Okay.
May I? I mean,
Yeah.
this will just, and then I'll be happy to fill out the answer to your question. So we have many, 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 many endless books about demons and so on, and also what they are and how they. So, and when the demon is in this world, let's say, or this universe that we exist in, you and I right now, they're invisible, only to us. And one of the things about demons, and by the way, demons have wives, they get married, they have children, and they have society, and they have a leader, which you could read about in the stories of Tanakh with King Solomon and so on. In fact, the leader of the demons, Amishadai, even took over Israel. He knocked King Solomon in the head and changed into a physical appearance. You see that a lot in Marvel movies. He took on a physical appearance. Maybe that's God just preparing us for like what's happening in the world. And he then looked like King Solomon and acted like King Solomon for years. Anyhow, but that's not the story I want to tell you. So everybody knows that demons like to rest under water spigots that take the flow off the roof of houses. So this one particular demon is in a village, and he's tired. And so he said, oh, look, there's a nice spigot. And he lies down under the spigot. Now, remember, he's invisible. And at that moment, two workers are carrying a very heavy barrel together, and they need to put it down and rest. So they don't see him, and they put the barrel innocently right on him. And he's like woken up for this barrel putting down on him. And I don't know how you say, I don't speak demonese. I don't know how he would say, like, what the, but however he would say in his language. And boom, he shatters the barrel, and the wine is flying all over the place and so on. Now, most traditions, that's where the story would end. By us, that's where the story begins. So what happens? The two guys go, like, it's not like Casper the Friendly Ghost when suddenly the humans see him. It's a ghost and they run away. They grab the demon and they take him to the prison. And so now there's a court case where it's these two guys taking the demon for damages of their barrel. And the rabbi, who's the head of the court, name is Rava, is gosh, I forgot my English. Whatever, he's residing over this case. So he says to the demon, he says, "What do you have to say?" And the demon said, "Really, what do I have to say? Everybody knows that demons rest under these water spigots, and therefore they should have, even if they didn't see me, they should have known. There's a chance. There's a demon there. So walk another 2 feet and don't put it down on me." So he says, the rabbi says, "Yes, but it's been decreed about 100 years ago that demons are no longer allowed to enter into populated neighborhoods. They can stay in their own places, in forests, mountaintops, and underwater, but they cannot come to where habited human places are. So you weren't supposed to be here. So since you weren't supposed to be here, for whatever reason you were at fault, because they didn't have to assume that you might have been there since you shouldn't have been there." So he loses the case. So the gavel comes down and he says, "You owe them X amount of dinar," or whatever the currency was in Talmudic times in those days, "and I give you 30 days to pay up." So then 30 days go by and the demon doesn't show up. So the rabbi decided he's going to give him a little flack, a little leeway rather, and he's going to give him another 10 days before he sends out the police to go get this guy. So within the next 10 days, sure enough, the demon shows up. Now, I'm imagining, just as a side, because my background, as you can see on my wall, is an animation as well. So I'm imagining, since you can't see the demon, like in the courtroom, all you would just see is like a little floating bag of money coming in. So the demon comes in and he pays the money. And Rabbi says, "Okay, fine, you're off the hook. That's good. Please don't allow this to happen again." He says, "But I want to know why you didn't show up on time. When I told you to show up, you better show up. Why didn't you show up?" So the demon says, "Well, Rabbi, what do you think? I'm human? I'm not human. I can't go get a job and work. The only way I can find money is if somebody accidentally drops it, I can snag it. So it takes longer when you're looking for lost money to come up with that kind of money than if I had a bank account and could have just withdrawn it." And that's where the story ends. So
Okay.
what you see here is an incredible, there's no this like, "Ooh, it's a ghost" at all. This is another life form, which is actually in many levels much higher than the human life form, because it was created at the last minute on Friday before Shabbat came in. And therefore, in a certain sense, they're trapped because they're very spiritually high. I'm going to qualify that in a minute. but they weren't able to get bodies. So they have a king, as I said, they have a whole society, they have a whole thing. But there are, just like human beings, you got white ones and black ones and red ones, and you have good ones and bad ones. So you have the same thing among demons. There are many stories of demons that saved people's lives or stepped into political situations and took on the look of a Roman senator to help sway good legislation to help people. And there are many stories of almost, let's say, see, because that's the problem. When you use the word demon, then you come to the word demonic, and it sounds like devil and stuff like that, which is not in the least. So their name is actually called shading, which comes from the word, I think the English word even, shade, shadow. So there are many of them that are, they're all different types. And, like you had a whole form of idolatry, which was called nymph worship, where you knock on wood, and depending on the wood that you knock on, different types of nymphs, wood nymphs, would come out. Well, we don't call them nymphs. Those are also types of demons. And therefore, there's certain ones which are associated with palm trees, which are very dangerous. And then there's certain ones which are associated with other types of trees, which can be actually very beneficial.
Okay, so
That's
yeah,
the short version.
so you have angels, um, which is they essentially serve God. They're like, I think you've described them as like algorithms before. That they have like functions. They serve God, and the Satan, he is an angel, so he's not what we're talking about right now, a demon. He's an angel that's supposed to be like a sparring partner. And then after this life, when there's like a judgment, I remember you saying something to the effect that it's like he's almost like the prosecutor where he's like, look, you know, I tempted you with this and then you went ahead and did it. Why'd you do that? Like so angels, Satan, demons are another type of God's creation that do not have bodies, but they're similar to us as far as like races and society. They have a king, and then you have us human beings. And what was the purpose of creating the demons, or like where do you like
I'm not
why?
sure. I've wondered that myself. And the thing I've realized is that it's tough to get God to give me answers. You know, I'm really kind of not that significant. I'm just a visitor on the planet. But I mean, my gosh, forget demons. I mean, just study science. Look at nature. Look at, do you know how many existing, let's call them life forms, you just swallowed in one drop of water? I mean,
Yeah.
why are those all? I mean, the only thing I can tell you is that there was once a person who said to God, there are two things. Why do you make them? One is, why do you make people with mentally challenged brains? And why do you make spiders? And who was that man? King David.
Oh, what?
That's right. King David said to God, why do you make crazy people? And why do you make spiders? And God said, guess what? Those two features will save your life. And sure enough, when his son Absalom was trying to usurp the throne in Israel, and he was going to kill his dad, and King David ran for his life, and he ran over to Moab, today known as Jordan, and he was suddenly captured by the king, who was the brother of Goliath. And everyone said, "Oh, look, here's the Jew that killed Goliath. Let's kill him." And David suddenly started acting like a completely mentally incapable human being, to the point where the king said, "This can't, it might look like David, all the Jews, they look alike, and this can't be the. Look at this guy. He's an imbecile. He's mentally deranged. This is not the David that we know of." And that's how he saved his life. And then the second time, he was in the area of Engedi, just about 45-minute drive from here. And King Saul was trying to kill him. And the armies were flushing out Engedi, and David was running with his men. And they saw a cave, and they ran into the cave. And God made a miracle that the entrance to the cave would be covered with a huge, thick spider web. Now, when King Saul came and they were looking all around, King Saul had to go to the bathroom. And because he was extremely modest, he saw the entrance here with his spider web. He knew nobody's probably been in there for 150, 200 years. So he cut away the spider web and he went into the cave and did his duties. And no idea that behind him was King David with his men. And his men said, hey, this is a great opportunity. Kill him. He's out to kill you. Kill him. And of course, King David wouldn't kill him. Instead, he came over and he cut the corner of Saul's garment to say, look, I could have killed you, but I didn't. Obviously, I'm not out to kill you. Why are you out to kill me? And that was how things actually began to resolve. But the spider and the insanity, the two things that saved David's life. So I really don't know about the demons per se. I mean, lots of stories and so on. It's fascinating. But I mean, there's so many creatures on this planet. The only thing I could possibly try to speculate is that life is not just about coming out of your mother and landing up in a tomb, hopefully 100 years plus later. It's like where our souls are going like this, and there's a part on this amusement merry-go-round which is called Earth, where you pop in here and you pop out there, but you're still you are evolving and raising yourself, hopefully. If not, many people, but those that are trying to become closer and better people, they're going through these things. So maybe somehow being in that shading world is one step to an angelic world. Don't know. Really don't. I don't know.
Interesting. Well, I guess at some point those answers will come or be revealed or
Yeah,
something
no
like
rush. No rush. Let's stay tuned. We have plenty of time. By the way, what's the word for angel in Hebrew? Do you know?
I don't know.
Malach. Malach is an angel.
Like the same word as king?
Almost, except it has an aleph.
Oh,
But now
okay.
say the next. What's the word? King is melech. Well, what does that
Interesting.
word mean? King. Break it down.
I
You
don't
learned a
know.
little Hebrew. It was all gone.
Not enough.
All
I've
right.
kind of I've
You
kind of set
know
it
that.
aside for a little bit. It's like hard, like everything that I do on this channel, like everything I take care of at home. It's like it's hard sometimes to squeeze those things in, but I try.
God forbid, not criticizing. I'm empathizing. Also, I tell people learning Hebrew is like chewing on stones. But so we do know in Hebrew that certain letters, as a prefix to a word, like in English, you would have an adjective, but it's often a separate word. The adjectives in Hebrew become embedded into the core word, and so too the suffix at the end can be. So a very common prefix in Hebrew is the Hebrew letter mem, which is like the English letter M. And that word, or sorry, letter, as a prefix means from.
Yeah.
Right. Then you have a suffix at the end of the word, which is cha or lecha, which means to lech, to go. So the word king actually means from going. It has no middle. It's from, it's like past tense, going, future tense, but no present tense. Because the whole idea of the king is not, forgive me, Mel Brooks, it's not about being, it's good to be the king. The whole idea about the king is that you serve the people. Not that the people serve you. I mean, they may, because they have to respect the king, of course. But the bottom line of the king, or president of a major power, is to make sure that they're doing everything, not sleeping at night, if the citizens of that country need his help. That's what a king is all about. It's all about serving God as a responsible party to disseminate blessing to the people. And the angels are the same. They're just one step away, because that little aleph, which always that letter represents God, is like each angel has like a little mission statement dropped in. King has endless missions, so it doesn't make sense. But each angel has a little thing in it that says, okay, here's your mission, and they're out the door and they go do it. So that's why it has a little aleph. But otherwise, it's the same word. Angels are just simply about going from to in the service of God, which is really what we should become like. We should become angels, because humans are greater than angels, because angels don't struggle with these evil inclinations that we live with. And therefore, if we can overcome these and we can still be like angels, just hovering, waiting any and every second. Oh, there's a poor person. Here's $10. Oh, there's somebody's car needs a flat. Hey, I've already got the jack working. Here's right. Just live like that. It's
Mhm.
not about me anymore. It's about making yourself a pipe that allows that godliness to come through you into the world. Then guess what, man? You go upstairs after 120 years. Did you see in the NFL game when the guys come out how they all slap like that? Do you know like how many angels will be lining up to be like welcoming you because you became a human angel?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not it will be. It can be. It's doable.
Yeah. That's
We're on the
great.
court, man. There's no dress rehearsal here.
Um, Speaking of kings, so the way that it went is originally when Israel got established in the land, there wasn't a monarchy, it was a system of judges, right? And then later Israel wanted to have a king like other nations, and so relenting, God allowed them to have a king and chose Saul to be the first one. So in and Messiah comes through the Davidic line, and so there's this future king. Is there ever a
Well,
time in
sorry to interrupt you, but only
yeah,
one of the messiahs comes through the Davidic line. The other one comes through the Joseph line,
yeah, right.
which is Saul.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we've talked about that a little bit. But is there a time in the future where things would ever go back to a system of judges? Because it's clear that that's what God wanted in the first place. So why, like, would that ever come back, or is that like completely
Ah,
abandoned?
I think you missed a patch there. If you look carefully, God clearly says that he wants a king, but it'll be at a time when God decides it's time to have a king. And the nation preempted that. They said, well, we're not waiting for that. We want one now. We want a king and we want to be like all the other nations. The whole idea of having a king is not to be like all the other nations. We see what's happening to Israel. None of the other nations are treating Israel on the international platform as they would any other country, doing something 3 million times worse. And especially, if you think about 1,200 people killed in one day out of our proportion, what that would be way beyond any Pearl Harbor. So the nations are not at all, I shouldn't say that, a lot of the nations are not really behaving themselves the way that we would be like, because if we were any other country or any other nation, the purpose of having a king for us is that highlights so that when people will come to Israel, they will see God when they see the king.
Why was that space of time where there wasn't a king? Is that explained why it wasn't like right away, you know?
Right. It wasn't the time. The time hadn't come yet. Just like the time for Mashiach hasn't come yet, or maybe it's pretty close right now. Could I ask you to hold on for 1 quick second?
Yeah,
Can I call you back in 10 minutes? Bye. Sorry.
that's fine. Well, let me ask like one final question really quick from one of my followers. Um, okay, let's see. Okay, from the haystack. Uh, when you meet with the rabbi, can you ask about his insight of the burning bush? What is it called in Hebrew, and how is it understood by them? And really quick, before you answer, would that be a manifestation of Shekinah, like the burning bush, like when that happened? Is that right?
And in a sense,
Okay. All
I
right.
mean, the
So
Shekhinah is a different thing altogether. The Shekhinah is the Merkava. It's the
chariot.
yes. Oh, excellent. See?
Oh,
Ha!
I know that word. Yeah.
Good. Yes. So, of the 10 Sfirot, only two of them are feminine, and they are the most important ones, which is at the high Bina, which is wisdom, which women have more Bina than men, and then Malchut, which is the kingdom. But if you notice, the word is in feminine. It's not it's not the Malcha, it's the Malchut, it's the feminine. So it's really the queen. And therefore, this idea of the Shekhinah is the godly expression in the feminine, because Shekhinah is also feminine. And it's from in modern Hebrew, we say the word shochen means like a neighbor, or a shchuna is a neighborhood. So shchina means the dwelling place of God, meaning the feminine queen. That's very, very different than the idea of the burning bush. The burning bush in Hebrew is called a sneh. I guess in English, maybe I'm going to guess SNEH. That's a bush. And it doesn't ever call it a burning bush. It says the bush that was not consumed by fire. Now, of course, that would be the burning bush. But it's a sort of a deeper idea, because something burning is burning. But something which is not being consumed has fire which is not burning. And the idea is that, I mean, you have this expression in English of fighting fire with fire. And in fact, in our teachings, there are 6 different types of fire. But that's not this. This is telling us that illumination is more powerful than physical fire. Physical fire, in fact, in the military, fire, right? Is this idea of power and fire and my weapons and my power of my hands, which leads to idolatry and so on. Koichi b'yodi atzmi. It's the power of my hands that have built my empire. Really? Okay, glad you think so. Anyhow, so that fire actually creates a light which blinds us from seeing the real light. So the earthly fire, let's call it television or movies or social media or whatever, all these other streams, these fires are fires which are deadly fires, because they give people the wrong impression. People get killed because of these wrong impressions, and there's a lot of danger, and economies collapse and governments collapse and whatever. But these fires are the fires of, let's call it the sun. The sun is the king, if you will, of these fires. And if you think about it, the daytime blocks the reality of the universe. I mean, you probably, I'm sure in Texas, I'm sure in Kansas, you have plenty of places where you can go out at night and you can really see the stars.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, guess what? Here's a big surprise. Those stars don't go away in the day. Many people think they do. You know, somebody once asked me, well, where do the steps of the escalator go once they go in that, right? I mean, it's not the stars go away. So what happens is the sunlight blocks us from that greater, deeper vision of God's phenomenally big universe. And now suddenly just this planet, and I got to buy a new car, got to do this, blah, 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 blah. And so God came along and said, I'm going to show you that if you connect to God, then you're going to have a fire, which is an illumination that is not only not destroy like the fire of weapons, but it's actually going to be something that is more powerful than any other energy in the world. And that is going to be a power which will illuminate your mind. You know, I remember I was in the army here. Somebody said, you know, because in the army, I'm sure we had always like break down the gun and reassemble it and so on.
Oh yeah.
So somebody once said, what's the most dangerous part of the gun? And he said, it's the nut behind the trigger. So
That's true.
of course, the guns don't shoot.
You always
Right?
have all these idiots that they're supposed to have, like, be safe with their weapons, and like they'll accidentally like point it at you, and it's like, no, don't point that toward me, and don't have your finger on the trigger.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So the most dangerous part of the gun is the nut behind the trigger. So therefore, it's the same idea here as well. If you could just tell the person, put the gun down, you don't get killed and he doesn't get killed. So wisdom is much more powerful. You could actually try this one on. If you could really get wisdom into the world, you could convince people to just take all their weapons and turn them into agricultural tools. Is that a little biblical ring to you from
Yeah.
Isaiah?
Yep.
So that's what God was saying. And do you know where the burning bush encounter was? It was Mount Sinai.
It was on
So
Mount Sinai. It was on Mount Sinai.
sure, look at the verse carefully. God says, I will bring you back to this mountain. And then if you look at the Mount Sinai experience, now you have the burning bush in steroids, because it says that the whole mountain was engulfed in fire. Moshe was in the middle of that mountain, 40 days, 40 nights. The mountain never caught on fire, right? That was like the ultimate upgrade, because now the wisdom was just flowing down like completely out of control.
Yeah. Really neat. All right. Well, I should probably let you go at this point. It's been an hour,
Oh,
but thanks again. And for, I
this is
mean,
my second day off the bed, you know. Yesterday I couldn't even talk. I was still laryngitis from the flu.
oh, really? Even as recently as yesterday?
Yeah, well, yesterday I was up, but I wasn't really, I couldn't talk for more than maybe 10, 15 minutes before my voice popped out.
Oh,
And
wow.
today
Well,
they feel humid again.
the timing was perfect. I guess we picked the right day.
Yes, yes. Thank God. Baruch Hashem.
All right. Well, I hope you continue to recuperate and that your
Amen. Thank you.
grandsons will be safe and protected. Um,
Amen. And may your followers on your YouTube continue to shine and grow. I love the questions. You know, I want to tell you something about a question. When somebody asks a question, you really see how deep they are, because they needed to formulate it in the world that they understand. So these questions are very telltale of some very special people who are hitched a ride with you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
All
Sure
right.
you do.
Well, I'll talk to you again in a month. And you
God
guys, if you haven't
willing.
already, make sure to leave your questions for next time, and then if there's time, I'll try and get to that and ask Rabbi Gerfine. And I'll talk to you guys later.